I want you to picture something. You spend 3 years of your life building something from scratch. Nights, weekends, time you'll never get back. You bring it to your boss, the person who was supposed to have your back, and they look you in the eye and tell you it's not quite there yet. 2 months later, that same idea launches company-wide, with your boss's name on it and an $80,000 bonus in his pocket now. Most people in that situation would do one of two things. They'd quit in anger, and that would be the end of it. Or they'd stay quiet, swallow it, and let it eat them alive for years. I did neither. What I did instead took 6 months of patience, one very specific mistake on his part, and resulted in the end of a 15-year career. His, not mine. My name is irrelevant. What matters is this story, because if you've ever worked somewhere and felt invisible, disposable, or stolen from, every single word of this is for you. Stay with me. Because the ending, it is worth it. Let me give you the full picture so you understand exactly what was at stake. I started at this company, I'll call it Meridian Solutions, that's not the real name, when I was 27 years old. Mid-sized tech consulting firm. About 340 employees. The kind of place that talked about culture and family in every all-hands meeting, but had a 40% turnover rate every 2 years. I came in as a mid-level analyst, nothing glamorous, but I was good at it. And I was ambitious in the way that young people who haven't been burned yet are ambitious, openly, naively, completely. My direct manager was a man I'll call Richard. Richard had been at the company 11 years. He was in his mid-40s, well-dressed, good at the performance of confidence. He could walk into any room and make you believe he was the smartest person in it. Took me about 2 years to understand that was all it was, a performance. But at the start, I admired him. He seemed like the kind of person I wanted to become. I worked hard to get his approval. I stayed late. I sent emails at midnight. I volunteered for the projects nobody else wanted. And for a while, he rewarded that. Small things. A compliment in front of the team. My name mentioned in a meeting with senior leadership. The feeling that I was on the right track. Looking back, I understand what that was. It wasn't mentorship, it was grooming. He was investing in my loyalty so he could spend it later. About 2.5 years in, the company was facing a problem. Our client retention rate had dropped significantly over the previous year. Clients were finishing their contracts and not renewing. Senior leadership was pressuring every department to come up with solutions. Richard called a team brainstorm, 7 of us in a conference room. It was one of those sessions where everyone throws ideas at a whiteboard and most of them get erased by the end. I had been thinking about this problem for weeks before that meeting. Not because I was told to, because I genuinely found it interesting. The core issue, as I saw it, was a disconnect in how we measured client success. We were tracking the wrong metrics, the ones that looked good in quarterly reports, but didn't reflect whether the client actually felt value. I had built a framework, a detailed one. I called it internally the value alignment system. It was a way of restructuring how we onboarded new clients, how we set expectations, and how we measured outcomes in a way that aligned with their definition of success, not ours. I had 22 pages of documentation, a working prototype for how it would function in our existing system. 3 case studies I'd modeled using our past client data. I didn't present all of it in that brainstorm. I gave the overview, the concept, the headline. The room went quiet for a moment, then Richard said, and I remember this exactly, and that's interesting. There might be something there. Let me think about how to position it upward. Something in my stomach shifted when he said that. Not alarm, not yet. Just a small, quiet note that I filed away and forgot about. For the next 6 weeks, Richard asked me to keep developing the framework, in private. just the two of us, no other team members involved. He said it was because the idea was sensitive, that if word got out prematurely, it could get shot down by politics before it had a chance. That made sense to me at the time. I kept building it. I brought him updated documents every week. He would give feedback, ask questions, push me to go deeper. I thought we were collaborating. I thought he was preparing me to present it to leadership together. At week 6, he told me there was going to be a presentation to the executive team the following Thursday. He said he needed to frame it strategically and would handle the deck himself because he knew how to speak the language of the C-suite. He asked me to send him everything, all 22 pages, the CRM prototype, the case studies. I sent it that same evening. I was not invited to that Thursday meeting. I found out about the meeting from a colleague who had been in it. She pulled me aside the following Monday morning, expression somewhere between careful and uncomfortable, and said, "Hey, that presentation on Thursday, was that your thing?" I didn't understand the question at first. She explained. Richard had presented a framework to the executive team. He called it the Client Success Alignment Program, CSAP. He had delivered it with a full deck, a working prototype, and 3 supporting case studies. The executive team had loved it. They had approved a company-wide rollout, and they had awarded Richard a bonus. She didn't know the exact number at the time, I found that out later, for strategic innovation. My name was not mentioned once in that meeting. Not in the deck, not in the verbal presentation, not anywhere. I went back to my desk. I sat very still for approximately 4 minutes, and then I felt something happen inside me that I can only describe as a door closing. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter than anger, a decision. I want to be clear about something before I continue. At this point, I had 2 choices that most people in this situation take. Choice 1, go to HR immediately. The problem with that? I had no documentation that proved the idea was mine. Every document I had sent him was sent from my work email to his work email. There was no paper trail that established priority. No timestamps that would hold up. And his word, a 15-year veteran of this company, against mine? A 2.5-year analyst? I would have lost that fight badly. Choice 2, confront him directly. This one is tempting. It feels satisfying in theory. In practice, it would have resulted in him getting defensive, going to HR before I did, framing me as unstable or disgruntled, and I'd be walking out the door within a month. Both of those choices hand him the win. I wasn't interested in either. What I needed was evidence. And more importantly, I needed patience. The thing about people who do what Richard did, they don't do it once. They can't. It's not a one-time mistake. It's who they are, and who they are always surfaces again. I decided to wait. And while I waited, I started documenting everything. I created a private document saved only on my personal laptop, never on company systems, where I logged every interaction with Richard. Dates, times, exact quotes where I could remember them. I went back through my personal email, the account I used outside of work, and found that I had, fortunately, sent myself several early drafts of the VAS framework months before that Thursday meeting. Those emails had timestamps. They predated Richard's presentation by over 2 months. That was my first piece of evidence. I also quietly reached out to 2 former colleagues who had left the company and who I knew had witnessed, in passing, conversations between Richard and me about the framework during development. I didn't ask them to do anything yet. I just reconnected, stayed in touch. And then I waited. Richard, emboldened by his success, became more careless. Over the following months, I watched the pattern repeat itself. Smaller scale, different targets. A junior designer whose branding concept appeared in a client pitch without her knowledge. A data analyst whose methodology got referenced in a board report with no attribution. These people didn't say anything. They didn't know what to do. I said nothing either. But I documented everything I observed: dates, specifics, names of the people affected. At month 4, something happened that I had not anticipated, and that changed everything. Richard made a mistake with the CSAP rollout. The framework I had built had a very specific flaw that I had known about and had been actively working to resolve. It related to how the system handled clients in the enterprise tier. There was an edge case in the CRM integration that would cause data mismatches for accounts over a certain size. I had flagged this to Richard during our development sessions. I had documented it. He had apparently not understood the significance of it, or simply hadn't paid attention. When the enterprise rollout hit 3 months in, that exact flaw caused a significant data error for 2 of our largest clients. One of them escalated directly to the CEO. Leadership started asking hard questions about the framework: who built it, where it came from, how thoroughly it had been tested. Richard, under pressure, made the mistake that finished him. He blamed the error on unclear specifications from the team, which meant he had to acknowledge for the first time that the framework had not been built entirely by him. The week after Richard's statement about unclear team specifications, I requested a meeting with HR. Not to complain, not to vent. I walked in with a folder. Inside that folder, a printed timeline, 6 pages, documenting the development of the framework with dates cross-referenced against my personal email timestamps. The earliest draft was dated 14 weeks before Richard's executive presentation. Printed copies of 7 emails sent from my personal account to myself, containing progressively developed versions of the VAS framework. A written statement from one of the former colleagues I had quietly stayed in touch with, confirming that she had heard me present the core framework concepts to Richard in a one-on-one meeting approximately 8 weeks before the executive pitch, and a second statement from the junior designer who had experienced a similar situation with her branding concept, and who, when I approached her privately, had been waiting for exactly this kind of moment. I laid all of this on the table. I did not raise my voice. I did not express emotion. I simply said, I have reason to believe that a significant portion of the work attributed to Richard originated with me and potentially with other members of the team. I'm bringing this forward because I believe it's material to the current investigation into the CSAP rollout issues. I'm happy to cooperate fully with whatever process you need to run. The HR director looked at the folder for a long moment. Then she looked at me. Then she said, "Can you leave this with us?" I had made copies. I left the originals. The investigation took 3 weeks. I was interviewed twice. So were 4 other people, including the junior designer, including the data analyst. I learned later, through back channels, that during his interview, Richard had doubled down. He had claimed the framework was a collaborative evolution of ideas that had started with him. He had been unable to explain specific technical decisions within the prototype that anyone who had actually built it would know. That was the moment it ended for him. At the end of week 3, Richard was placed on administrative leave. 2 weeks after that, he was gone. 15 years at that company, done in 3 weeks. The $80,000 bonus was clawed back. I did not receive it. That's not how these things work, but it was removed from him. More importantly, his professional reputation in our industry, which is small enough that everyone talks, was gone. I know for a fact that at least 2 subsequent job opportunities fell through for him because of what came out during that investigation. 6 months after Richard left, I was promoted. Not as a direct result of the investigation, at least not officially, but the framework was reattributed. My name went on the documentation. CSAP became VAS again internally, my original name for it, and it is still running in that company to this day. I stayed another 2 years. Left on my own terms for a better opportunity. Walked out with strong references, a clean record, and the satisfaction of knowing that I had played every single move correctly. I've told this story to a handful of people over the years. The reaction is almost always the same at the revenge part: satisfaction, the nodding, the yes. But the part people underestimate is what actually made it work. It wasn't anger. Anger would have destroyed me in week 1. If I had stormed into HR the day I found out, with no evidence and nothing but my word, Richard wins. Full stop. It wasn't confrontation. Confrontation gives the other person time to prepare, to spin, to get ahead of it. It hands them the narrative. What made it work was 3 things. And I want you to remember these because if you are in a situation even remotely like this one, these 3 things are the difference between justice and just being a cautionary tale. Number 1, documentation. From the moment I suspected something was wrong, I kept a record of everything: dates, quotes, evidence. The personal emails I had sent myself months earlier weren't strategic. I just had the habit of backing up my work externally. That habit saved everything. Whatever you're building at work, keep copies outside company systems, always. Number 2, patience. I waited 4 months. 4 months of going to work, being professional, watching him take credit for my work in meetings I sat in. That is genuinely hard. But it was necessary, because people who operate like Richard cannot stop themselves. The next mistake is always coming. You just have to be ready for it. Number 3, I let the institution do the work. I didn't destroy him. HR destroyed him. The investigation destroyed him. His own inability to defend technical work he hadn't done, that destroyed him. I just opened the door and pointed. The most satisfying revenge isn't the explosion. It's the quiet moment when the system that protected someone finally turns on them, because you gave it no other choice. Richard is out there somewhere. I don't know what he's doing now, and I genuinely don't think about it. That's the part people don't expect. That the best ending isn't obsession with the person who wronged you. It's that at some point, they simply stop mattering. If you've been in a situation like this, or you're in one right now, I want you to hear this. You don't have to be louder than them. You don't have to be angrier than them. You have to be smarter than them and more patient. The truth, when it's documented and presented calmly, is the most powerful thing you can bring into any room. If this story hit home for you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one. And drop a comment below, because I read every single one, and tell me, has something like this ever happened to you? Because I have a feeling I'm not the only one.